E-bikes don't really have a lot of extra service that needs to be done outside of just normal bike maintenance, but there are some crucial things that will save you in the long run. So we're going to talk about those today. We're going to talk about what you need to do to make sure that your e-bike is going to last and have a long, healthy lifespan, so your $3,000 investment doesn't go down the drain. You know, the whole point of this channel is to educate you guys and to talk to you from a shop owner's standpoint. I've been in the business for 4 years now. You know, we've seen just about everything. So we are pretty credible when it comes to what we talk about here. So these are our rental fleet bikes. These are bikes that get used and abused all summer. So we're going to pull out one of these bikes from our fleet and kind of go through what standard maintenance would look like, and then also talk about some other tips and things that we'd recommend for your average daily commuter rider. Doesn't matter if you're mountain biking, if you're commuting, if you're road biking, these tips will apply to all of those things. So let's jump right into it. We're going to grab one of these bikes and get her going. This guy here. So I guess the first thing that we can talk about is how you should maintenance your e-bike, how you can access all these different components and parts. You can always flip the bike upside down. Now, this is a cardinal sin in the bike world, but e-bikes are a little bit different. All right, they're a lot heavier, and especially if you have a hub motor like most e-bikes, they're a lot harder to get out, and fighting gravity is not fun. Don't let anybody shame you for flipping your bike upside down, unless you work in a bike shop. That might be a different story. For now, we're going to throw it on our stand here. All right, so one of the first and most important tips that I tell all of my customers is going to be regarding the battery. How you charge it, how you take care of it, how you maintain it. These are all crucial things. The battery is typically the most expensive part on the bike, so you really want to make sure that you're taking care of it properly. So there's a lot of misconceptions and a lot of different ideas about how you should be maintaining your battery. So really, when it comes down to it, you just do all of them just to be safe. Most e-bike batteries nowadays are lithium-ion batteries. They're just like your phone batteries. They have what's called charge cycles. Every battery has a certain amount of charge cycles, and a charge cycle is when you deplete the battery or use the battery and then you recharge it to 100%. That is one cycle. This battery, for example, has about 1,000 charge cycles to its lifespan. Now, when you hit the 1,000 lifespan charge cycles, your battery will slowly start to diminish the amount of miles and the amount of power it will give you. So what I recommend for a lot of my customers is if you're riding and you're only using 2 to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10% in a day, and then you're going to do that same ride the next day, there's no need to throw it back on the charger. The good rule of thumb is the less you charge it, the longer it will live. It's not going to ruin the battery if you're charging it every day. You're just going to get less life out of it. The other thing is temperature. These batteries and their cells are affected by heat and the cold. I think the standard rule is that you don't want to have it sit beneath 40 degrees. I've heard 45, I've heard 50. If you live in a cold climate and you leave your bike in your garage, take your battery off, bring it inside. So don't let it sit in the cold. Same thing goes for the heat. This is our charging station here. We have about 4 different chargers from 48 to 52 and 36 volts because we have different types of batteries. At night, we have a timer switch that goes off. We don't let our batteries charge for more than 12 hours at a time. Our bikes are being used every day, so we do have to charge them every day. We really try not to leave them on the charger for more than 12 hours. I don't know the exact science behind it. If you know, leave in the comments, but it's pretty much a general rule throughout all of our vendors. Another common thing that I see people do is they'll stick their key in their charger port when they're trying to remove their battery, which will blow the fuse on your battery. It's a common issue that I see all the time. So if your battery stops working one day or if it sparks, I got a customer coming in. So more often than not, your battery will have a fuse and it'll look something like this. These are pretty cheap and typically pretty easy to replace on these batteries once you open them up. But by doing that, chances are you will void warranty by opening it up. So make sure you check with your manufacturer first. If you blow your fuse, if you accidentally stick something metal in your charger port, whether that's your key or something else, if your battery has a fuse, chances are you blew it. Crazy. So if your battery has diminished in power or you're not seeing the same kind of mileage that you were getting before, you can always get a voltmeter. and check it. It's pretty easy to do. So that's always a good way to check to see where your battery life is sitting at. Let's talk about cleaning your bike. Now, like I said before, you can use a hose and wash it down. Typically what we use is some kind of bike cleaner, whether it's muck off, this is a super wash. This is what we'll use to clean the frame. Just take a washcloth, take a brush. You can clean the whole bike. Do be careful about what soap you use, because if you're going to spray your rim and your back tires, you don't want to get any kind of oily solution on your rotors or your brakes, as that will contaminate them. So before you clean your bike or before you touch anything up here, make sure that everything's closed. Make sure that all the wires are fully connected. Make sure that you're not getting water directly into these electrical components. Same thing goes for the battery. If it's got a cover for the plug or a cover for the USB port, make sure that those are closed before you start spraying. All right, so now let's talk about some riding tips, specifically how to use the motor. Now, again, we're talking about hub drives here. This doesn't really apply so much to mid drives, although we will touch on a couple mid drive things as well. There's not a whole lot to go over with motor maintenance. If something goes wrong, it's best to deal with your manufacturer. The motors can get pretty complicated. There's lots of gears and wiring and stuff that is not fun. So now the one thing to notice with hub drive motors, just like a car engine, if you're putting too much strain on the motor, it's going to wear out, it's going to grind your teeth. I see it all the time. These motors give out because people are putting them under so much stress. How can you avoid this? If your bike is a class 2 and it has a throttle, use your throttle sparingly. Your throttle is a full power assistance to the motor, especially if you're on an incline. You're going to be putting so much strain on that motor, not giving it any help, and it's carrying you up a hill. That motor is under a lot of strain and it's going to wear it out a lot faster. Same thing with longer rides. Even if you're on flat and you're doing an hour ride, do not throttle the whole time. Basically, only throttle when you need to. These bikes are made to be pedaled. They have pedals for a reason. Give the bike some help. Now, hub motors have a rear axle that sits into the drop out of the frame, and they're connected by these nuts. Now, depending on how nice your e-bike is, if you have a really cheap one, this is very important to look at. I'd do it every ride. These rear nuts can get torqued because there's so much power torquing on the frame and the wheel. These nuts often get loose. So it's very important. Take a crescent wrench and just check those bolts. You know, obviously same thing on the front and all of your bolts on your bike, but I do see quite often these bolts will get loose. Your wheel will fall out of the axle. Your brake will rub and destroy things and your bike will be destroyed. So make sure you do that. If you didn't listen to anything else I said, make sure that you tighten your rear axle bolts. All right, now for mid drives, it's a little bit different story because the most common issue I see on mid drives are worn teeth and snap chains. Your mid drive will engage the entire drivetrain. You can think about when you are pedaling and the motor is giving you that extra torque, that extra assistance. If you're under a lot of torque and you're changing gears, you're going to wear out your teeth a lot quicker and potentially snap your chain. All right, now let's jump into the drivetrain. This has some of the most moving yeah, well, I guess that's right. The most parts that move. So how should you maintenance your drivetrain? Well, what is your drivetrain? It's your derailleur, your cassette, your chain, and your chain ring. So it's pretty simple. One, you want to make sure that your derailleur, if you have one, is tuned. You want to make sure that the cable from your derailleur is always tight. It's in line with your gears. It's shifting well. Another big thing is cleaning your drivetrain. When you go ride through dirt and mud and gunk and junk, it's going to collect on your drivetrain, or if it gets wet. There's a couple things that you can clean it with. What I recommend is some basic degreaser. Again, using a degreaser meant for bikes, there's a less likely chance that you're going to contaminate your rotors. So this is Simple Green. This is what I recommend. I wish they were a sponsor. I do a ton of videos on them, but whatever. Basically what you're going to do, you're just going to spray it all over. You can spray it on the derailleur, you can spray it on the chain, you can spray it on the front ring, and that's basically just going to grab that grease and grab that dirt, and then you can take a brush and clean that out. It's also very important is get yourself some chain lube. I've heard a couple different opinions on how often you should lube your chain. Some people say every time you ride. Some people say every other ride. I mean, look, as long as you're doing it, just lube your chain every once in a while. Really, that's all that matters. If your chain is rusting or it's squeaky or it's gross, grab some lube and you're just going to slowly put it on your chain as it comes around. It's also good to clean your chain before you lube it. So you clean it, dry it, lube it, rub it in. Those are the steps. I'm using a Finish Line dry lube. You can get different lube based on your climate that you're in. If you use, like for example, if you use a wet lube in a dry climate, you're gonna get a lot of buildup. So just make sure you know what you're buying. Obviously, there is a whole nother level of steps that you could do to maintenance and clean your drivetrain, but this is just really for people who have their bike at their house and just don't want to spend a ton of money, just basic bike maintenance stuff. Okay, let's talk brakes. Now, brakes are also important. So what can you do to maintain them? Well, if you have hydraulic disc brakes, really the only thing that you can do for basic maintenance is take some rubbing alcohol. I'm sure you have. Take some rubbing alcohol. If your brakes are squeaking, it's good to keep them clean. So you can take rubbing alcohol, take a paper towel, and you're just going to wet the towel, wipe your brake rotors. If you have rim brakes or drum brakes, obviously that won't work. And then again, there's more complicated stuff with bleeding and brake pad changing and all that good stuff. The one thing that you can do is keep an eye on your brake pads. So the way you do that is you're going to turn the wheel right towards you. So it's right in line with your eye. You're going to look down at your brake. You're looking between the rotor and the pads, and you want to see how much life you have left on your pads. It is kind of hard to tell, and you might need a flashlight, but something good to just check on. If your brakes are squeaking or you hear metal rubbing, take it to your bike shop. That means that your brake pads have either worn down to the metal, or you've lost them, or they're rubbing on your caliper. Something's wrong. Take it to your bike shop. It's no good. All right, lastly, let's talk tires, more specifically PSI. PSI, general rule of thumb is the higher your PSI, the more often that you should be putting air into it. Your air will deflate. There's some rumor out there that you need to like swap out your air every now and then. That's complete and utter BS. There's no reason to it's not going to go bad inside the tire. I don't know. Anyway, quite often see damaged rims because people's tires are so low, especially on 4-inch tires, where it's kind of hard to feel. If you're not paying attention to your PSI, if you hit a curb, you could easily hit your rim or pop your tube or all that kind of good stuff. Tread, another thing. You want to make sure that if you have a bike that has decent tread, keeping an eye on that as well. Having bald tires will lead to flats and slipping and bad stuff. So just another thing to check up on every once in a while. All right, hopefully this video helped you out a little bit. If you guys want to learn more about e-bikes, check out our channel. We have review videos, e-bike maintenance and tips, and how-tos. Thanks.